Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit.
There's no time like the present to start building, and in this board game review, you better build quickly before the rising waters catch you in Whistle Mountain from Bezier Games. In this game, you are using airships to build up and industrialize the Rocky Mountains area. However, as you build, you'll start melting the snow in the mountains, causing the water level to rise, possibly catching some of your workers and trapping them in a whirlpool.
It's a risk that you might have to take if you want to get the most points when you play this game. Here's how it works. On your turn, there are two primary actions that you can take. You can either collect or forge. Collecting is what you're going to probably spend most of your time doing. This involves your 3 airships. You have 3 of different sizes and types. You've got a hot air balloon, a blimp, and a dreadnought. And they all get bigger in size as they go. And you can place them onto different parts of the board to activate different effects. At the center of the board is an area where there are going to be tiles laid out. There will be some at the start of the game and more added later on, and those tiles will have resources on them. There will also be water resources at the bottom that represent the water that's rising as the game goes on. And if you put one of your ships adjacent to one of those resource spaces, then you are going to receive those resources. You cannot put those ships on top of these pieces, which are called scaffolding. So, the ships don't actually get to land. They're just going next to it for right now. If you want, you can put your ships onto the sides of the board for different kinds of effects. On the left side, you'll see a lot of different machines of various sizes that you can purchase by spending some of those resources that you gathered earlier. These are machines you're going to be able to build later on that will have different effects that will change a lot of things in the game as to how you decide to play and strategize. At the top of the board, you can also purchase some cards. If you place your ship up there, cards will have different effects. You can play these on your turn as a bonus action, so they don't count as your main action, but you only get to do 1 card per turn. They might give you some resources or allow you to take a little bit of an extra action that you normally wouldn't be able to on your turn. On the right side of the board is where you'll be able to get upgrades. Upgrades are special abilities. You can have up to 6 of these, and these are all kinds of different effects. They might make some actions stronger or give you brand new actions, maybe even allow you to use certain resources as a wild resource instead of for things that they are normally required for. And then you can also purchase new scaffolding to be placed later on. If you spend whistles, another resource, you can get more of these scaffoldings. Otherwise, you'll just get 1 when you place one of your pieces here. And as the game goes on, you will be collecting more and more of these scaffolding pieces or these machines, and you will be able to make use of them once you enter into the forge action.
The other major action you can do is forging. The first step of this is recalling all your airships back to your board. You do not need to have every airship out, but usually that's the best time to do so. After that, you're going to have the chance to either build up or place workers. Let's start with building. On this board, there is a grid, and you have the option to either build scaffolding or those machines we mentioned earlier. Scaffolding has to be touching at least one other either machine or scaffolding. It's pretty much connecting. It can't be floating off somewhere. Other than that, you can just build it any way you like, but more sides it's touching when it's built, the more points you get. So if you just put it here and it's just touching one thing, that's only 1 point. But if you sort of fit it into another place really nice, you're going to get a lot more points. The other thing are machines. Earlier, we showed the machine spots. There are different levels with different sizes. To place a machine, you need to put them on top of scaffolding where there is that many spaces. So the small 2x2s need to be put on scaffolding that has at least 2x2 spaces available and touching. Now, you cannot put these on top of other airships if they're out on the field. So if an opponent has an airship on the space somehow, you can't build scaffolding or machines upon it. If there are workers placed out there, you can. You see, you start the game with all these workers in the barracks and some in the whirlpool. You will have the option during this turn as well to spend some gold to either take from the whirlpool or the barracks and place them on top of scaffolding. When someone puts machinery on top of workers, regardless of whether it's theirs or someone else's, this promotes the workers, moving them to the right side of the board here. Now, there are ribbons here, and the first meeple over there, whoever's turn it is, decides who goes over there, gets that bonus. Otherwise, the meeples will stay over there, and they will get you some bonus victory points. Now, that whirlpool, on the other hand, is a little bit different. You see, the barracks are where most of the meeples start, but Whenever you build a machine above this bridge where it says danger, well, you have started melting ice. That will cause these water tiles to go up and take up an entire row. This will not only take workers and bring them into the whirlpool, but any machine space it starts to cover fries the entire thing and it's no longer in commission. Scaffolding isn't mostly affected, you just can't get the resources that you can't see. Now, it's important to save those workers, not just because, they're people you want to save, but you will lose 5 points for each worker in the whirlpool at the end of the game. So you can either spend some extra gold during this phase to bring them out, or there was an action space over here we didn't go over, which is a way for you to save some workers from the whirlpool. During the worker phase, you will have an option to save or place a total of 1 worker, as well as build up to 3 items, whether it's scaffolding or machines, any order that you choose. The important thing is, as you build more of these things, that's more options for your airships to get more resources. And for the machines, either placing on top of them or next to them will trigger the machines and activate them, allowing players almost to have more spaces to trigger more unique effects.
The game ends once all of the workers have been removed, whether that's by the player's own actions or by the water getting so high that all the workers are sent to the whirlpool or whichever ones are left over. So it is there's a little bit of pressure here. There's some suspense in this game. You got to try to stay ahead of that rising water. And there's a lot going on in this one. It is, for the most part, primarily I would describe it as a worker placement game. But I think because of the central area where you're placing these tiles, and that's a large aspect of the game is focusing on how you position those as well as where you place your airships by those pieces. That really makes it feel very different to me than most other worker placement games. While the spaces on the side of the board are kind of traditional, okay, my piece goes here, I get to do this action, or I get to buy this thing. When you have that whole middle board section as well, the mountain itself, that feels like a very different game of how you're placing these and how they're interacting with other players' ships too.
To me, it's almost as if the outer board, as you said, is the classical worker placement of even taking spots away from other people, but the center is actually building spots. You have to decide how you're going to place these Tetris-like pieces, and if you're going to make a place that's really good for an airship to just stop it and get a whole bunch of resources, make them more close together so you get a lot of points. And of course, those machines then almost act like new worker spaces, like getting you more resources or trading in one to draw a card or something. It feels like as the game progresses, you're all of a sudden have so many more options, so that even though you technically have these 3 airships, which would technically be your workers for worker placement, but the little human meeples are technically called your workers. So yeah,
yeah, it's a thing. It's a naming convention that you have to, maybe if you're a seasoned board gamer, wrap your head around a little bit differently. Yeah, and it's also very interesting in how, I love games where players have a shared space. So you have to work together. Well, you're not working together, but you have to consider what other players are doing, and you are all building up on the same mountain. So sometimes you might think, oh, I'm going to put this scaffolding in this machine here because that's a perfect spot for me. But the next player might take that spot before you get a chance to that round, and you can't do anything about it. So you have to consider that. And that's something else that's interesting, is the fact that you can recall your ships whenever you want. Mm-hmm. So there's not like a phase when everyone does it. So different players might be at different stages, sort of at different times. And that too is really going to change the dynamics of how you look and think about what the other players are doing.
I was going to say, for me, that's actually a big standout point compared to other worker placement games. There's plenty of times when the turn order can really depend on, or not depend, but decide how the game's going to flow. Like, well, I already know that the more aggressive player is before me, so he's always going to take up those slots. So that's just, I'm never going to have those available to me. I better switch my strategy. But here, maybe I really want to be able to place a worker somewhere. I need to be placing ahead of Jonathan, for example. I might instead of placing all my airships out, call up on that forge turn. And that changes the entire dynamic and tempo for everyone. And because of this, there's a lot more planning around that. And I really enjoyed it because you never really felt locked out as much as in turn order.
Yeah. Or another thing is, I wish I had more workers. In this game, it's like, well, you want your workers back? Just take them back.
Look, there are plenty of worker games where you get your workers back, but I feel after the maybe second quote unquote round, like after everyone has gone twice in their forging phases, I never really felt like a couple other ones. Like, what was the game we reviewed recently? I'm blanking on
Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Lost Ruins, where I'm like, I just need one more. I was usually like, no, I can do cool stuff. Doing this and get them back. Yeah. I never like. There's always more to do, but you never felt like you couldn't get away with what you wanted to try to do.
I think it's an interesting comparison between those two, because I think in this game, the pace of it is really largely determined by the players.
Mm-hmm.
So you can build really aggressively and build up past that mountain and start that flood and end the game pretty quickly. Or everybody could kind of like hang back and keep it cool and just get points.
We had both extremes of the game where I was like, I'm going to start this flood fast. And another one where just like, we were fitting them almost perfectly and just barely like, I think we had like one or two floods before we're like, oh, the game's ending.
So I think that could depend on your players, where some games you might feel like, oh, not generally, I think there's not as much pressure, but sometimes the pressure might increase a lot depending on how everybody's strategizing.
There's also this, we didn't mention it, but you get a starting ability at the beginning of the game, which will really help zone in how you're going to play the game. And they're not like, you get a little extra bonus. They are pretty good. These are the kind of things I would have, if I saw on the upgrade tiles themselves, I would probably buy. Like, they are very strong, which means like each game, last time, like, oh, I can place on scaffolding, because the airships usually cannot go directly on scaffolding, only machines. Versus another one where maybe every time you put a worker on scaffolding, you actually get to draw a card.
Yeah. I mean, between that, the different player powers at the beginning, the upgrades you get, the machines that can come out, there's a lot of different variables, and each player does feel pretty unique. You do kind of have your own power, and even a little bit, depending on which upgrades you get, there's a bit of an engine building element to it as well.
Crits and misses for Whistle Mountain.
Crits. Players are in control of the tempo of this game to a large degree, whether it's the game overall and how they build and how fast the water level rises, or their own personal turns when they choose to call back their airships.
This is not the first game to have an action that recalls your workers, but usually in other games, that's your entire turn. You still get a good bonus for when you do that, so you will be rewarded, whether it's a strategic move to try to change up the tempo, or you just want to get your pieces back for a new round.
The mountain itself is a shared space between all players that you will be building on and sending your airships out to together, even though you are competing. And it makes it feel very different from a typical worker placement game, and also makes you be mindful of what everyone at the table is doing.
It really does feel like a great customizable worker placement area. Because it's a shared area, you are all working together, sometimes begrudgingly, on possibly making some very strong spaces that could reward a lot of resources, or maybe trying to play a bit more strategically, such that you're making spaces that aren't that optimal for whatever your opponent's trying to build.
There's a big variety of different upgrades and machines, and in combination with your starting player power, there is a lot of potential here for pulling off fun and satisfying combos.
Be it from what upgrades or machines come out to even just what starting power you get. Each game is going to feel significantly different and really challenge what strategy you want to bring to the table. Misses. In the rulebook, it explains what every card and machine does on its own. This is very helpful, but it does turn out to be a little confusing sometimes on how they interact with each other. In particular, there are a couple of times we had questions because the iconography didn't seem to be consistent among pieces, and it could have used maybe just a little bit more polish.
On their own, you won't have too much trouble discerning what exactly each space, card, and tile does, but you're definitely going to need to have that rulebook reference handy. There are a lot of icons, and especially when some of those more advanced tiles come into play, you're going to need to look up exactly how they work when they're interacting with certain other pieces.
The medium and large machines, as well as the upgrades, have a large variety of different abilities, but sometimes no one really wants any of those. And this game, unfortunately, doesn't include a way for you to really refresh the system. You sort of just have to wait till someone buys something. And if no one's interested, it can feel a little disappointing. There's nothing good for you out there.
Especially in games with lower player counts, you may just be stuck buying something that you don't really want, which could hurt you a lot in the long run, because otherwise you're waiting around without anything to spend your resources on. Whistle Mountain is a follow-up game to Whistle Stop that Bezier Games published previously. That one was a train railroad game, strictly on the ground. It was a pick up and deliver game that we didn't have the chance to play, but I don't really think they have much in common mechanically. It's more just a somewhat of a common theme, and you are still like traveling, I guess, but it's very, very different. You're moving up, you have these tiles and everything like that. And I think that they overall did a very good job with it. Like we said, it does a lot of different things that it's hard to really pin it down, even though, of course, it's a worker placement game. It really doesn't feel like that to me. There's so much going on we're talking about, like with different engine building and resource collection, and the fact that your resources also cap at 4, so you have to manage how many you get and how you optimize that. There's a lot to think about. I think there's a lot of depth here. The more that you play, you are going to tap into different strategies.
For me, I just love the fact because there's so many times that I'll play a game similar to this where I just feel I'm always behind, not because someone's playing like super amazing and is just running circles around me. It's just the thing I want to do is always taken right before me. And I feel like with this, even with the limited number of spaces, and I can't remember if I might be misremembering this, but I don't think there's any like real player, like we opening up more spaces. You may see sometimes if you have a larger player count, like what you see is what you get. You are the one making most of the space by interacting with other players. And because you can change that tempo to be like, all right, Jonathan keeps taking the spaces I want. I'm going to make sure I do the forge action, call my ships back before him. Therefore, now I've turned the tables. So because of that, there's a much more of a back and forth with that. And then, as you said, with the board, the way you build those pieces, and all of a sudden we had it was really funny. One game we made 2 really optimal spots, which obviously one would get one would get the other in this 2-player game. And it almost like we felt like we got spoiled because of it. Since it was very low, the water rose to stop the 2 machines that helped it out. And we're just like, there's nothing as good as this. And we just never designed anything like that. And so that was on us. We made some fantastic spots and just never decided to do anything better about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is every time you play this game, how those things come out is going to be very different. So it's always going to be a slightly changed experience. I do also want to comment on the theme of this game, which when you examine it is a little bit horrendous. Like, you are literally building up machines on the side of a mountain, forcing your workers into dangerous labor and destroying the mountain in the process, causing flooding, damaging the environment. When you look at it, it's like, oh, this is a fun, lighthearted, silly game. But if you kind of think about what's going on, it's a little scary. But I don't think that's really an element you need to think about while you're playing it. Just something I thought was funny.
I'm sorry, Jonathan. I can't hear you over all these victory points I have.
all that money. That's what's important, baby. But yeah, a cool game. Had a lot of fun with it. A lot going on. If you are interested in that kind of thing, you like worker placement, or maybe if you are tired of worker placement and you want to see a different spin on it, I think it's worth taking a look into.
By the way, a quick mention, we should also talk about these components are very nice. I mean, all the airships look different. I'll put a picture up right now of like this. They actually have like nice little gold bricks and not silver, like bronze whistles. And of course, silver for the anvil. Like, they're not the more simple generic painting. They're very nice and flashy. So that's also a nice touch.
Yeah, it's a nice design. I hope that it's someday they do the digital version of this game so that you can have the mountain actually be vertical, like you're traveling up it.
Ooh,
I think that would be a nice touch.
Like, and then you get to actually see the water. Yeah,
or maybe a Velcro version. Maybe it's the board is just vertical and you stick stuff to it.
They need to design, like when they make the life-size versions for conventions, a Velcro version, so you just slowly stick things on the board.
Let us know in the comments, what version of Whistle Mountain would you like to see? Do you like this new game compared to Whistle Stop? What do you think about it? What are your different strategies? Talk to us in the comments section because we want to hear about it.
Mm-hmm. We'll be checking them down below probably by the end of this month. So make sure you make it in time for our Meeple Gallery. Until then, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Will.
I'm Jonathan.
This has been a Roll for Crit review.
Hey, go ahead, like and subscribe, and support our Patreon for even more board game content.
Support us now to hear the audio expansion, where you can hear all the other nerdy things we've been up to.